Hello there, and welcome to the I Never Knew podcast, also known as Inc. This show dives into the life experiences of people who have been through it all and have come through the other side stronger, better, and triumphant. Each story is raw, authentic, and, at times, heartbreaking. One thing joins it all together: the fact that the stories can help the listener learn and grow. Hosted by life coach Maureen, she sits down each episode with a new guest who will empower the listener to set out on their self-discovery journey and start to heal. Now you'll be joined by Maureen and her special guest. Please enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of I Never Knew, But My Dog Did podcast. So excited everyone is here. I'm pretty high energy today. I am on my third cup of coffee. Yes, I said third, and really it's probably technically my sixth because it's a travel mug. So poor guest today. But she's lovely. I'm so happy everyone's here. Thank you all for joining. Listeners, I'm always so excited to bring you the best guests I can possibly bring and the most intriguing stories. And I think today our guest is going to, as always, we keep topping ourselves. And I want to introduce you to Miss Amanda Quick, who is an author, a mother to 3 boys, a wife, quantum energy healer, coach, speaker, and spiritual channel. Her memoir, The Sex Trafficker's Wife, is releasing January 10th, 2023. In it, she shares her biggest trauma of her life when her ex-husband was arrested for attempted human trafficking in 2016. That event was a pivotal moment that changed everything for her. It was a catalyst for her spiritual awakening and taught her how vital it was for her to take back her power and fight for herself and her children. I am so excited. Hi, Miss Beautiful Amanda.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is going to be such an interesting conversation. I listen, I read that bio and I think, she's like a younger me. It's just, you have these really difficult situations in your life and you're just kind of going along with the motion thinking, oh, life is just happening to me and this thing's happening and I got to just survive and go through the mud and the weeds. And I did the same thing for 45 years and you're a lot younger than I am. And it was that moment, that pivotal moment where it was like, oh my gosh, I'm causing all of these things, not because they did these things, because they chose their way, but that I allowed certain things. And then it was time for me to go, okay, something has to give here. So in the spirit of I Never Knew, let's start with your empowering story. Tell us how this all transpired and start wherever you want, from childhood or
beyond. So the biggest thing I never knew truly was that my ex-husband lived a double life. And, I was a full-time stay-at-home mom. I had 3 kids. In 2016, my youngest was 1, still nursing. I was the co-sleeping, breastfeeding, baby wearing natural mom. And I was very grateful to be able to stay home with my kids when they were little. And because my husband works long hours, he had a IT security job. He made over 6 figures. So his, role was making money, and he traveled a lot with his job, and I was home with the kids, and we were very normal, so to speak, and very much the American dream, what you think everybody wants. And we didn't necessarily have the most connected relationship, but we had 3 young children and he worked a lot, and there was lots of reasons that seemed to make sense. And I figured as the kids got older, we would be able to have more time together and all of that. But one day he doesn't come home from work. And yes, he works long hours and different things, but he had just messaged me and said, is there any food, leftovers available or anything? And I said, yes, of course. And then I assumed he'd be on his way. He was only 10 minutes away, and an hour went by and 2 hours went by. and he wasn't answering his phone. And I went, something. Now, this was not uncommon for him to not answer his phone or to get distracted with something else. And so I went to bed and I just said, I had gotten to the point where I didn't want to fight about him not answering his phone or not coming home when he said he was going to. And I just said, I'm not going to waste sleep. I've got a nursing baby who's going to wake me up in a couple hours. I'm going to sleep. And at 2:00 in the morning, I called the hospitals when he still wasn't home, not there. 5:00 in the morning, I called non-emergency dispatch because I still couldn't find him. And I didn't think I could report him missing yet, but I didn't really know what else to do. And they transferred me to the jail. And they said, call us back if he's not there. I'm like, okay, I'll call you right back. Turns out the jail had him, and he had been arrested for attempted human trafficking with a $250,000 bond.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, what? You, what?
Right.
To talk about a shock. I didn't even know what it meant. I had to Google the charge because in my head, I went to like shipping containers. I went to this like border crossing stuff, and it made zero sense. We had plenty of resources, plenty of money. Like I knew where he worked. It was, And I also had a ton of fear running through me. Like somehow I was going to get caught up in this also, like guilty by association, when I had literally no idea what was going on. And I had 3 kids sleeping in the house at that moment. Like, what am I going to do? So, obviously wide awake at 5:00 in the morning, calling bail bondsmen, calling lawyers, calling everybody to try to figure out what to do. Because in my head, something else, there had to be a better explanation. There had to be something else going on. Either he was dead in a ditch and somebody had his wallet and was then caught up in this, or, there was something else going on. Like none of it made any sense. For the reality that I was living, it made zero sense. And so I proceeded that way, and then got a lawyer. And in Colorado, you have a bond hearing within a couple of days. And so when we went to the bond hearing, we learned that it was actually a sting operation. And it was a sting operation where they offered children, and then the defendants showed up to meet the children for sex, and them were arrested. So that's when we actually learned what more happened.
Oh my God.
And so the sting operation, they offered an 11 and 14-year-old. They were hypothetical children, but that was the sting. And my husband was one of the men who showed up. So it was the sex trafficking specifically. And the way that works is you buy and sell people of any capacity. It's considered trafficking. And so still shocked, but still in complete disbelief. Really, in my mind, there had to still be some other explanation. Something else had to be going on. It made no sense. It made like none whatsoever to me at the time. And so I still proceeded as if I have no choice but to help him. I have no choice but to figure out what's going on. My kids deserve to have a dad in their life, because my own trauma from my father meant that I didn't have a dad in my life after I was 9. And I blamed my mother for that, even though he was the one who hit her. And so I had a really big abandonment wound, and very fearful that I was going to create that in my children if I didn't stay and support my husband no matter what. So I was running this, I have no choice. I have to make sure my kids are okay. The only way they're going to be okay is if they have their functioning dad in their life. He's going to be better if I support him, and they're going to be better if they have their dad. So I don't have a choice. That was the programming I was running. And so in order to make myself okay with that, I then chose to believe his version of events and his story that he basically said, where he admitted to escorts, he admitted to seeing them, and he was very flippant about it. It was just saying, I've been doing that since forever, unbeknownst to me. But he said there was never any kids, and he didn't believe it was real. He thought they were just trying to rip people off, but because if there was any chance that it might be real, he needed to find out so he could report it, but he was too scared to report it otherwise because he would get in trouble for what he was doing. And so I chose to believe that story because it meant that I could stay and try to support him and through the criminal trial, because like I said, I had in my mind, there was no other option but to make sure that he was okay, so my kids were okay, and that would then somehow make me okay. And that was my belief. And so I did. I stayed. And, when you go through sex offenses, he's removed from the home completely, no contact with the kids. We eventually got supervised visitation. Lots of chaos, and they're young. They don't understand where their daddy is gone. They're very upset. When he comes for supervised visitation, they don't understand why he can't stay. They're and how you can't explain this to a 1 and 4 and 6-year-old. It's not, it doesn't work very well.
Right.
And so, there's a lot of legal process that goes on, and it's all very slow. And eventually he was evaluated for probation, and he was offered a plea deal. And so he never served a single day in jail other than the first 2 days he was arrested, and he was offered only probation. So privileged white man in America gets 4 years of probation for trying to meet an 11 and 14-year-old for sex.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I mean, there's so much here. I'm just listening to you like, wow. And I get that belief system, and I get that the no choice, excuse me, that no choice thing. And also, no one can judge, because we never know what we're going to do in that situation. If you're not in these situations, I hear my guests say these things all the time, their stories. And I think, and they're like, don't judge. There's no judgment, because we don't know. And I've done some crazy things in some crazy crisis situations. And you're right, that belief system of bringing that trauma forward from your own childhood and then being that more adamant. I did the same thing where it was like, okay, he's only harming me. He's not harming my kids. So I come from the domestic violence marriage. And that's silly, because then my kids are learning it. But we know that 2020 is hindsight. But wow, I can only imagine what was going through your mind at the time, like thinking, my entire life is a lie. I don't know this person, the father of my 3 children. I no longer know this person. When were you able to like finally get to a point where you're like, I don't believe anything you say, and you're just full of lies? And when did you finally reach a turning point where you were like, oh my gosh, something has to give here?
So it took a couple of years. It actually took a couple of years, because once he was on probation, he actually was able to move back home, because in the state of Colorado, there was a new Supreme Court update that does not remove the constitutional right to parent for a sex offense. And so once he pled guilty, he essentially got his parenting rights back. And at the time, I was grateful, right? It meant I didn't have to do all the things by myself anymore, but he could not be around other children. He couldn't go to schools. He couldn't, do any of that kind of thing, but he could be around his own kids. And so I still had a lot of logistics. I still was the one who had to make all the disclosures, have all the conversations, which, continued to re-traumatize me over and over again.
Yeah.
But I had to do that. And so, but eventually I actually had to go back to work, because I hadn't been out of work for 6 years. He lost his job. And while we still had savings, it was, not forever money. And it seemed like my employment gap was just going to get bigger. And I didn't want to be stuck in a situation where I couldn't find work if I needed to. And so I went back to work. And what was happening as I was going back to work, it's like I had created this family bubble where I was safe inside the family bubble, because the only person it was even safe to speak to about what happened was my husband. And so it's kind of like what kidnappers do to their victims. The only safe person to talk to is the person who caused the trauma.
Yeah.
And you protect that person. And I was doing that. But then as soon as I left the bubble and I was in this other world, I was all of a sudden terrified that anybody was going to connect me to him and what happened. And so it was like this, okay, which one's the problem? And I started to see more of what was going on just in the smallest bit. And I realized I couldn't be in the marriage. I would come home after work and need to have half a bottle of wine to even look at him and talk to him. And he would want to talk to me and reconnect and all these things. And I would see like ghosts. If he wanted to be intimate in any way, I would see like all of these people that would show up in my awareness. And like, that's how you looked at all of them. That's what you wanted to do with them. And it just kept happening over and over. And I couldn't do it anymore. And so I realized I needed to leave the marriage, but I still was holding on to this belief that he was a good man and a safe father, because again, all of my programming, I refused to look at it. And, my mom even said to me, like, you guys should, move closer to your sister and you can have help. And I said, I'm not going to take my kid's dad away like you took mine away. Like I said that to my mother. And I was
definitely some deep-seated stuff there that did not want to come out.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I was holding on really for dear life to this identity I created that I was gonna do this differently and all of this. And so I eventually actually started dating. I found myself attracted to a coworker and decided I was gonna tell my husband that I was moving on. And he held onto all of my, he pushed all of my trauma and said, well, I'll stay in the house and we'll co-parent and, all these things. So the manipulation started. And I got to experience some fun and some different things besides being mom and wife. And that was really good for my mental health as I started dating. But, I was now having this really odd relationship with my husband who was living home. We were like sleeping in separate rooms. We had 3 kids at home. We had this complex, probation nonsense. The kids are in school and their activities, and I'm trying to date, messy, very messy.
Wow.
And he doesn't want to move out. He doesn't want to. He's like, we don't want to do that with the kids. And I know on some level he was obviously terrified of what was happen if he did move out and what that would look like. And eventually the messiness of that dating relationship got even messier because I got promoted. I was going to be his boss. So I decided to break it off and focus on getting my life back together. And then of course my husband wants to get back together. And I'm like, no, you misunderstood. This was not, this was not really about him. This was just what I needed to do for me. And then manipulation started to get even more because he wanted to talk all the time. He wanted to, he would treat me almost like his therapist. He wanted to deconstruct his offense and his mindset and his things with me, the person he, in a lot of ways, one of his biggest victims. And he would want to continue to go over and over in it with me. And I know. And the more I pushed him away, the more manipulative he got. And eventually he actually filed for divorce himself because he thought that would scare me. He thought that would, and then he also filed to kick me out of the house and claim himself as primary parent. Yes.
Wow.
Because I was working, right? So he was the one home and I was working. So clearly he was primary parent. Yeah. And he was trying to play hardball in a sense, and he was trying to use my fear of the kids, not doing well and having to go back and forth between households and all of this so that I would come running back to him.
Yeah.
It didn't work. We did, through a temporary orders hearing, the judge basically said, unless I could find evidence that he was unsafe to the kids today, we ended the temporary orders with 50-50. So the kids ended up going back and forth between households 4 times a week. He didn't actually kick me out of the house. He had to leave, but the house we had bought for him through this idea that we were going to be weird, normal, kind of co-parenting, sharing things, was right next door. So he moved out, but he was very close. And the kids are going back and forth 4 times a week, total chaos. The manipulations and the alienating behavior start to come into play. He starts to tell the kids, I'm the problem. I'm the one who won't forgive daddy. I'm the one who left them. And they start to get upset with me. He starts to do the Disneyland dad thing with all the video games and the candy. And I'm trying to hold the boundaries, and it just, things start to escalate more and more. And I'm like, what is going, like, what, and the way he would talk to me was like, he knew something I didn't know. And I did things just as bad as he did. I went and dated, and that's just as bad as what he did. And I'm like, huh, right? He would do these false equivalence thing. And he would make me feel like every insecurity of everything that I've ever done wrong or wasn't perfect made me a bad parent, made me just as bad as he is. And he's the one trying to do better. And he's the one trying to get better. So clearly he's the more stable person or something.
Gaslighting?
Yeah, big time.
I mean, that's a neon sign, gaslighting. I seen that a million times. Yeah, you're the crazy one. I'm
the crazy one.
That's
and I'm sitting there going, am I the crazy one? Am I doing something wrong? Is this really about me? Am I harming my kids? Right? Like you're questioning yourself over and over again, which just gives them more ammunition also, because they can poke at that. Yeah. And so I hired lawyers, I hired evaluators. I didn't know how to put this together. I didn't know how to divorce somebody who was on probation as a sex offender, who had clearly lots of mental health stuff going on, who definitely had some, big major depression, anxiety. I didn't even know what other stuff going on with him, but I didn't know what to do, because I had so much of this running, like my kids need their dad and we have to do this way, combined with, but all of these unknowns. What's really going on here? What's really under the surface? And so I was in this position where I was giving all of my power to the systems, to the lawyers, to the evaluators. You choose. I don't know what to do. I was like totally indecisive about everything. And he even tried to drop the divorce. And I was like, you freaking filed. And I was pissed off at him for filing, for to blowing up the kids' lives again. But that, kept him thinking like, oh, why? It's because I'm just mad at him for filing and I actually miss him or whatever.
Right.
And he's just pulling at all of this. And so I'm running all of this stuff and I'm just giving all my power away. But at the same time, there's this underlying feeling of there's more going on and I don't know what it is and nothing feels right. And every time there was any kind of a settlement offer, it was like, no, can't do that. That doesn't feel good. And in mediation, actually, the mediator was like, you are so indecisive. He can feel all of that dripping off you and he's using it. You need to choose, like, you need to figure out what you want.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't want any of this. I don't want to be in this situation. I didn't do any of this. I didn't cause any of this. I want my kids to be okay. None of this is okay. And so he was the one who recommended we actually hire a parental rights evaluator to get involved. And then we didn't have to settle parenting time at the time. And the parental rights evaluator is somebody who basically looks at, and it's different in every state how this works, but they interview everybody. We had full psychological evaluations. They basically make a recommendation to the court. And so it's somebody to funnel all of the data through that is a third party neutral for the court. And so I just gave all of my power to her and I said, you choose, you figure this out. Because I didn't know how to do it.
Yeah.
And then her first recommendation was essentially 50-50 with some allowances for his probation stuff. And I was like, well, I mean, she thought of everything. And, the exchanges back and forth with us was getting worse and worse and worse. The kids were even getting physically violent to come to my house. Mm-hmm. They were totally, I don't want to be with mommy at all. And he was using that a lot. And I was, trying to hold it together. But, right after her report came out, we had like the worst exchange ever. And things were just like escalating and escalating. But, she's saying this is based on the courts, the statutes in the state of Colorado. This is what this looks like. And so we were like, okay, we'll try. I don't know what else to do. And we offered a settlement. He ignored it. He completely ignored it. And within that month that he ignored it, my middle child, who was 6, 7 at the time, starts to have his behavior changes. He starts to come on to me sexually. He starts to just his behavior around me shifts. There's just this little hint of like, I'm going to climb in your lap and like almost trying to make out with you. Like, get off. No, what is going on with my kid? This is not normal. There's no way he should, see this behavior or do anything of that sort. And then the bottom drops out again. I'm driving them to school, totally thinking about work and some presentation I'm going to do, not paying attention to them at all. And my middle child says, sometimes I suck on daddy's fingers. Yes.
Oh my God.
And so I'm like, oh my goodness. And it all comes rushing in my face. He was arrested for trying to have sex with an 11 and 14-year-old. All of the red flags that I missed the whole time we were dating. The fact that, I was 18 when we started dating and he was romanticizing all of my teenage promiscuity. He wanted pictures of all of the things that I had done in 16 and 17. And, he had wanted to bring other men in the bedroom when we were very, beginning of our dating, like all of these things. It was like, oh, hello, here you are. All the red flags you've ignored right here.
Right.
And I was like, well, but the statutes in the state of Colorado are saying that I have to share custody with him. And, I talked to my kid's therapist. I talked to my lawyers. I asked, the therapist said, you need to have him show you. You need to show you what that looks like. So, you can get an idea of what he's talking about. And I asked him to show me, and it was as bad as you would expect. And so then I filed the Child Protective Services report at everybody's recommendation, Child Protective Services came and interviewed him, scared him half to death. He was hiding under the kitchen table while the man was trying to interview him about the game him and his daddy were playing. No disclosures of any kind. So they closed that case. And I sat there going, what on earth am I going to do? Nobody seems to be able to help me. I'm literally at this point where I'm watching my children being groomed by their father. He has a history. Nobody seems to care because I can't prove that they're in danger today. This is apparently not enough for them. Nothing bad enough has happened. Probation doesn't care. They just polygraphed him and said, nope, he's not done anything sexually inappropriate. So all is well. Never mind the grooming conversation. I was literally at my wit's end. I was diagnosed with PTSD. Every interaction with him had become high conflict. There was like literal hostage situations going on between transfers, some type of negotiation, some type of parenting time change, some type of anything. He wouldn't hand over the kids unless I agreed to whatever his demands were. It was insanity. And I don't know what to do at this point. And I'm sitting here going, like, I'm going to end up sharing custody with a man who's going to abuse my kids. I'm going to live in this constant state of PTSD, of this trauma, because, I didn't leave when I, obviously before I didn't have that information or whatever it was. And I'm kind of at a loss. So, my lawyers are shocked. My therapists are shocked. Everybody's like, we don't know what to do either. We decide to get the evaluator back involved. We need to update the report. We need to get more information. Things are clearly escalating. We pulled the settlement and said, nope, we're going to court, but we have to prove, and it was very clear for me what the judge had said. With the information she had, she couldn't restrict parenting time. And so it was very much this, okay, how can I get her more?
Yeah.
So then my therapist at the time, regular mental health professional, says, have you ever seen a psychic? I was like, that's not even real. It's totally agnostic. Didn't really have any opinions whatsoever. Really disliked organized religion. But other than that, that was the extent of my belief system. And she's like, yeah, I know a good one who's legit. I'm thinking fortune teller in my head. And she's like, and I'm like, but at this point, I will try anything. You've got an idea out of the box. I will take it. Give me the name. So I go see the psychic, and she tells me, and she starts reading a past life of mine where 500 years ago, me and him were together and he was physically violent with me, and that I stayed to protect the kids and I put myself in front of them and I didn't believe I could make it on my own. And as she's telling me all these things, I was like, how are you in my head over the last 4 years? How are you reading exactly what I've been thinking and why I stayed, and all of like, I didn't understand how she had this information. And I started to feel all of this fear in me because she was saying he was really physically violent with you, and he had never laid a hand on me, but I could feel the fear in my body. And so my body was remembering the physical abuse. And that's the fear that I was holding on to and why I was so scared of him in this life. Yeah. And his deviances were different and the energy was different, but it was the same. And then she says, and now I'm watching him. He threw me down the stairs and beat me to death in front of my kids in this past life. And my thought as she's saying this is, what happens to the kids? And then she says, and then your dying thought is what happens to the kids. And I'm like, okay, you've got me. I believe you. And so she's talking about this and she says, you have to let go of this fear. You are not living 500 years ago where women can't own property and women can't stand on their own. And you have the ability to break this pattern. And this is the theme pattern coming up for you. And you have to collapse this fear and you have to choose differently. You have to decide. She's the reason you're sitting in this chair here today because you haven't chosen. You haven't truly chosen what you want yet. And so, there's been all of these messages, obviously, the whole time saying you haven't chosen what you want. And she's telling me again. And I was like, well, okay, I'm done. She says, no, you have to mean it. And that moment I realized there was some part of me that was still holding on to this family unit and the safety in the family unit. And that I wanted him to get better one day so my kids could have their father. And I let these possible outcomes still linger there. And in hopes that I didn't have to be in this situation because I didn't want any of this. Yeah. And I didn't want to have to believe that any of this was real, even though it was right in front of my face.
Yes. Denial is a very, very strong It's not just it's not a river in, Egypt or Africa, whatever,
exactly.
whichever.
And so she was like, you have to let all of that go. And you have to choose now that you were done with him. You were done with this pattern, that you were completely done. And I stood up and I said, okay, I'm done. And I didn't understand what I did energetically in that moment, but I released a ton of stuff. I shifted so much. And then she said, okay, good. She sat me down. She says, he is not interested in getting better. He has lifetimes after lifetimes of abuse of his own, and he is refusing to see it. He's going down a deep, dark place. And like, there's no coming back for him, at least where he stood at that moment. And so you have more help available than you know. You have more people who want to help me. You have more people out there who, everybody knows somebody. You need to keep asking. Anybody you can think of, you need to go and ask them for help. And so I was like, okay. And I left that session with this new resolve. Okay, how can I get help? The system isn't working, but there's got to be a way. And I went back to work, and a coworker of mine tells me she has an uncle who works for ICE, and they put me in touch with Homeland Security, and they put me in touch with the arresting officer that put the cuffs on him in 2016. And they put me in touch back with the local police department, with the guy who stood next to the guy who put the cuffs on him in 2016. They want to help me. They get the CPS case file reopened. They tried to do an actual forensic investigation on my son. Didn't actually go anywhere, but they were very much trying to help. My realtor suggests to call the district attorney. The district attorney unseals the case file for me, so that I now actually have the information of what happened in 2016, because I never really got it. Mm-hmm. And I was able to read the text transcript of what went back and forth between him and the undercover agents. And if I had any doubts before that, they were gone. I had 3 kids with the man. I knew some of his sexual preferences, and they were very clear there. And I started also listening to my kids in a different way. I started recording the conversations with them. I learned that he had been climbing into my son's bed at night, and I had that conversation recorded. I started reading them books about keeping private parts private and protective things. I started just gathering data over and over. And my stack of data when we went to court was like a 3-inch big binder. And I was damn determined in it. And I got this idea in my head, no stone left unturned. So anybody had an idea, I would run with it. I escalated probation. I called, CPS in other counties. Any idea anybody can think of, anybody they knew, I would go, and anybody they knew had, I would just try everything. I decided I needed for me to know that I did everything I could possibly think of and then some, because I was not going to give up. And if it didn't succeed this time, I would keep trying. You only fail if you keep trying, or you stop trying, right?
Right.
So that's what I ran with. And 6 weeks after that meeting with the psychic was my final divorce hearing. So this is where we were going to establish parenting time. And we had already tried to restrict parenting time a couple of times, and it didn't succeed. And so this was like the final time for a while, at least. And this was the first time I stood up in court directly against him in that way. I had stood up against him in the temporary orders hearing, but not quite in the same way, not with the belief that he was truly dangerous, and not talking about what was going on with the kids. And, we had the evaluator interviewed. I mean, it was the whole enchilada. And my lawyer was freaking phenomenal. He, made his case very well, very clear. And the other side was really a mess. They had like a couple of pieces of paper stapled together as their evidence against me. And, very just run-ons and ranting. And, he was still very upset that I wouldn't talk to him. And how dare I not want to talk to him, and all of that. And so in the judge, when I got on the stand and I told her what my son said and what he showed me, and how, what I believe to be true, and what I now understand about 2016 that I didn't understand at the time, and all of that, she was appalled that he was sleeping with the kids in any way. She ordered him on the spot to stop doing that. She wasn't ready to make her final order. They usually want to go through everything, but she kind of showed her hand a little bit by saying that was not at all okay. And I think it was 3 or 4 days later, which was the day before my 33rd birthday, my final orders came out, and she reduced his time drastically. She gave him only 2 afternoons a week, and she gave him a long list of things to do if he ever wanted to gain back more time. And if he did those things, excuse me, mister. If he did those things, he could have like every other weekend, but he would have to stay compliant with those things. And that included more evaluations, more disclosures, all kinds of stuff. And if he did none of those things, after 6 weeks, his parenting time would be limited to only supervised visitation. He did not a single one.
Oh my gosh. Thank goodness he didn't do any of it. That's the only time I've ever been happy that a father did not do something, because I want him as far away from your children as he can possibly get. And it's oh my gosh, you're just so amazing to me you're so powerful. When I think about, he had all of these opportunities. And what I love is that you finally said, no, I am not doing this anymore. I have decisions I can make and I have boundaries that I'm setting. And you wanted a father. You didn't want him. You just wanted a father for your children. And I get that, because my ex was that same way, where it was like, I felt so guilty. You and I share that there was a lot of guilt and shame for picking this person, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I felt terrible. And I ended up, my children are grown adults now, your age, matter of fact. My oldest is turning 32 this year. No, 33 this year. Oh my gosh. Interestingly, I enabled because of my guilt and shame. So I always, saved her from her problems. And I really did not help her grow because I had so much guilt and shame over her father being who he was. When I let go of the guilt, then I'm like, guess what? We've all had stuff happen in our lives, and I had to deal with it. You have to deal with it now too. So have you finally let go of all of that? I mean, I know you have, obviously, because you're a coach and you're a spiritual channel.
Yes.
I mean,
so that was now 2 years ago. So I got full custody of my kids 2 weeks before the pandemic hit. And we had no idea what the world was going to change at that point. And could not have been better timing, because they were never quarantined with him. And in a lot of ways, it made some of the things harder for him to accomplish. And I don't really care. And the other thing is, we have now not heard from him since April of 2020 either.
Oh
not
my
a phone
gosh.
call, not an email, not a child support payment, not a nothing. And he basically, instead of taking supervised visitation, he just peaced out. And the last time he called was my oldest son's birthday in April of 2020. And so it'll be coming up on 3 years here since any contact whatsoever. And people are surprised by that. He fought like hell. I mean, the amount of money I paid for my divorce was over $75,000. And, after all of that, he just vanished. But the truth is, a lot of times it was never really about the kids. It was all about control of me, and I got full decision making no matter what happened, and he couldn't handle that. There was no way to manipulate me or control me through the kids if I didn't have to communicate with him, if I didn't have to talk to him about anything, if I could just tell him how things were.
That's how narcissists work. Is it's not that they're fighting for something, they're just fighting against you. And you can see that's what the fight was about. When there was nothing left to fight about, and you stood up and you told him, I'm going to stand up no matter what happens. Guess what? I'm a new woman. I'm a different woman now, and you can no longer control me. So bye. And he just disappears. How are the kids? Good now? How are they doing?
Kids are good now. So the pandemic was a blessing for us because things were hard, right? They didn't want to be around me. They were pissed off at me, and everybody was home full time. My job went remote. The kids were home, and it gave us an opportunity to heal. It gave us an opportunity to be together differently. The whole world changed, right? And so it was a really great opportunity that I didn't expect at the time to have. And I eventually left my corporate job, and, they were homeschooled for a year because just all the insanity. And then I realized I also needed to leave Colorado because he wasn't around. His family wasn't around anymore. And my job was gone. So I decided to move. I decided I needed to have a fresh start and not have to worry about ever potentially running into them. And so we left Colorado in September of 2021. and started a whole new life. And I've now remarried, believe it or not. And so my kids, I met probably the only safe man I've ever known, truly. And I met him through, spiritual practices. I jumped into learning quantum healing modalities and other ways to help people through these things, because I realized if the psychic can talk to the angels, so can I. I want to be able to do these things. I want to be able to understand more about the universe. And clearly there's more out here. So I need to figure it out. And as I was taking these modalities, people all over the world you meet, and he was somebody that I met at a retreat at the final workshop of one of these classes. And so he's a yoga instructor and much more spiritual aware and emotionally much more present, and very different man.
I love the law of attraction. Right? Yeah. Once you do that soul journey and you figure out who you are, and as a relationship and dating coach, I tell everyone, do not go out there dating. Do not try to find your person until you are whole, because there are no halves to a whole. You have to be a whole person, and you have to love yourself unconditionally before you can find someone who will also love you unconditionally. So,
and he just he landed in my lap, literally. Like the synchronistic story of how we actually connected is crazy. And and my kids now have a dad. They have a stepdad, and they've even said recently, if my ex comes up in any conversation, which does occasionally happen, my middle child, actually, I don't say, it was only a few weeks ago, he looks at my husband and said, "No, you're our real dad."
Yes.
And,
yes.
That just hits you in a totally different way, that they get it. And
isn't it funny? It's be careful what you wish for, because what stopped you was your trauma of thinking it had to look this way. And then the bigger picture and the healing is you got what you wanted. You just you weren't so specific, right? You're just like, I want a dad. Okay. No, I want this kind of dad. And I find that I as well on my spiritual journey and discovered that I am a spirit guide medium. And like you, what I love is your story about being an agnostic and being like, what is all that? And I called it woo woo. I'm like, what is woo woo stuff? And when I started writing my first book, My Dog is More Enlightened Than I Am, it just was channeled. The entire book was channeled, and my husband edited it and gave it back to me. And I'm reading it. And I'm like, did I write this? I don't remember writing it, but it was just that flow. Things just came. That's how it is when I life coach as well. It's like, and now I do the readings as well. It's what I love was when you were talking about going to the psychic, when you haven't experienced anything spiritually like that, or something that really pertains, it's almost like you can't believe it until you see it, kind of thing. When I do readings and people are like, oh yeah, let me see what this is all about. And then I do readings and they're bawling and they're like, there's no way you could know that. After that, they're changed. And then it's like, Marie, when can I have another reading? When can I? And I surprised myself too, because I didn't know how to do any of that. And we all have that ability, I've always heard.
Yes.
But who knew? Yes.
Exactly. And so, I jumped into learning all of it, and I had to discover more. And, I have a technology background. I was an IT manager, and so I've now pulled this like quantum physics piece into the spirituality, and, the things that the channels that come through me are about like the gravity of our consciousness, and how do we work with time, and how do we actually go after our desires and manifest in a way that isn't just law of attraction, but, from a quantum physics perspective, and how to, and that's where my mind goes. And then I can look back at a lot of the things that I did, and I can see, because time isn't linear. This isn't like I learned something and now I can use it, but I actually get the keys and codes for what I have done when I've done these crazy things. And getting full custody of my kids after 6 weeks of just, changing everything about my energy, that was an impossible scenario. Colorado is such a 50-50 state that almost nobody ever gets full custody like that. And I achieved the impossible. And it was like, well, of course you did, and so I'm able to have more understanding and look back and see what I did energetically, and see, you know, what I did to attract my husband, and see what I did to move, you know, across the country with 3 kids and 2 pets and a 4-bedroom house full of stuff, just like that. You know, I've done some really crazy big changes in my life, but I get to understand now why and how I can share those stories with people so that they can pick up the keys and codes they need to realize that, you know, they also can change their lives. Like, no matter how bad it gets, because it was really, really bad. No matter how bad it gets, we can change everything. Oh, but we have to change self first. We have to start with us, and we have to recognize that we are our safe place, not these external things, not the system, not other people. We are who creates our safety, and nobody can take that away from us once we create it for ourselves.
That is so well said. And I love your perspective. This is why I love doing podcasts, because I get to learn so much. And my husband's an engineer, so he's a very linear thinker. And so you as well, coming from that background, but then now you also have the spiritual piece. I love that. So that you're being served so well here, and you're fulfilling a purpose that is so beautiful, because you've got this 50-50 balance where I'm so far over here in the emotional intelligence place. My husband's so far over here linear, that the yin and yang with us is perfect. And he teaches me and I teach him. And, you know, it's cool to be in the mental health, spirituality, wellness arena. And I say this all the time. I used to ask the question on the podcast, if you were carrying a banner, what would it say? And mine was, we're all saying the same thing. And when I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, yeah, we're all saying the same thing. You're like keys and codes and energetic. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I just tell you to feel good. I just tell you to go with what feels good. And it's all the same. It's all ultimately the same. And what I talk about is exactly what you talk about. And I say, you have to be your own best friend.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the speech that I give. And, you know, I'm trying to get my TED talk on that, is I was never my own best friend. I was always reliant on everyone else's opinion of me and their validation of me and earning love. And that soul journey for me was just saying, enough. If you don't love yourself, Maureen, how is anybody else going to? And that's why the dogs, and by the way, listeners, if you are able to see the YouTube video, she has a puppy with her the entire time here, her little Sonny, and he's a doodle. And oh my gosh, he like will not leave her side. He's looking out the window and then looking by her. And so the dogs, to me, just that's what they taught me, was just that love yourself unconditionally, because dogs just love unconditionally. So, oh my gosh, I'm in awe of you. And listeners, I want to say this. When she was in the thick of her crisis and this, just her whole world being flipped upside down, and you know, Amanda, when you were saying, I didn't want to make a decision. Life can be so overwhelming that a lot of us just will procrastinate and say, I'm not going to deal with it. And we can't see our way out to, like, you know, the other side of it. And it's paralyzing. It is a paralyzing moment of, someone fix this for me, because I have no way mentally, physically, or spiritually right now to know what I need to do, where I need to go. And I remember being in that moment, and I became a single mom. My kids were 8, 6, and 10 months old. So I feel you. And I remember it just being paralyzing. Like right now, it's like taking my breath away. Like I can feel the pressure on my chest when I think back to that moment of, I don't even know what to do with my life. I don't even know how to go through the motions. I only know how to do like the next 5 minutes.
Right.
Do you remember that feeling? Like,
I do. And I felt like there was nothing that I could do that was going to change anything. It felt like this was happening to me. I had no control. And, you know, this idea that I have to be okay with something I don't know how to ever be okay with. Yeah. And you just sit there almost totally, it's completely paralyzed, because you don't feel like you can have any power to change anything in that moment.
Yeah. And when, listeners, when you start the practice of meditation and you start, you go to a life coach, or you go to a therapist, or you go to a counselor, or you go to a healer, or, Reiki, or, anything that you're going to start your journey. The key is, when you start the practice, just take that first step. But then when it becomes a practice, you will no longer have those moments of being paralyzed. You'll have moments of fear. You'll have moments of shame, and you'll still have unexpected things that happen in life, their experiences. But it's weird how your mindset changes after that. Cause then you're like, oh, okay, what do I learn from this thing? Okay, why are you showing up here like this? Instead of like, oh God, here we go again. I remember I had a friend who I've ended a long-term friendship with. And we would sit and complain and complain and complain every morning at coffee. And I remember when something would go wrong, we'd go, oh no, it comes in threes. There's two more things coming. I mean, it was just like this doom and gloom all the time. And as I proceeded through this journey, I had to end that friendship because I realized, I had outgrown where that friendship was. And now the practice is, and Amanda, you glow like nobody I've ever seen. It's that practice, like you said, of when I get the power back, and when I look at life as if I get to control what I do, I get to create what's going to happen in my life. There is a freedom that you will never, ever know when you've been in these situations where you felt controlled your entire life by other people.
Exactly. Every time something happens now where it's, not what I wanted or whatever, it's an opportunity. It's not a doom and gloom. It's, what's the opportunity here? What is this showing me here? What's under the surface? This didn't work out because something better is on the way. And I know without any shadow of doubt anymore that things will work out better than I can expect, as long as I stay focused on what it is I truly desire and, what I am creating. And if I can keep holding that and trusting that and keep taking those actions, it always does. And so it's such a different perspective. There's no something happening to me anymore.
Yeah, it's relieving. It is relieving. And none of us who have gone through, and everyone has gone through these difficult experiences in life. You can't go through life without difficult experiences. None of us who've been on one side and then are on the other side of it can look back and say, oh, I would have seen this. I would have seen this light at the end. No one could have known. It's such a intricate process, and it is a determination to say, I have to do this for myself, and I want this. When negative experiences come forward, or toxic people show up, or anything that comes in my life now, I always say, okay, where am I unhealed? Because if I'm feeling any negative emotion, anger, sadness, rage, disappointment, it's a place in me that is unhealed because I had an expectation, and that expectation wasn't met.
Exactly. Or if I'm get triggered by anything, it's a reflection, it's a mirror back to me on some other thing. Somebody else is doing something and it bothers me. Why do I, what in me is that showing? It's an opportunity. Every trigger, every thing that doesn't happen exactly perfect is always another opportunity to dig deeper, to learn more, to create more with.
Yeah. I always ask myself, why am I allowing this? Why am I allowing this? And the one thing I tell all of my coaching clients and everybody I run into, nothing meant for you will ever miss you. And that keeps me going. Especially, do you ever have moments in your life where you're really excited and you're anxious about something, and you want it to happen like right now, and then circumstances happen and it didn't happen right then and there? I'll give an example. Shopping for a home that I'm looking for. And I can't give too many details right now because I have some legal things going on, but I saw the absolute perfect home, and because of a legal situation, I can't act on it. And I was so like, I was crying, and I was like, understand what's happening. And the funny thing is my grandson, who's come to live with me, he's 15. He's been with me for a year. he's the one that spit my words back at me. And he said, hey, grandma, nothing meant for you will ever miss you. Remember, you're going to have the perfect thing at the perfect time. And I'm like, shut up. No, I'm just kidding. I was like, I know. He goes,
I mean, I had that happen to me exactly when I was trying to move, and the perfect house multiple times, didn't work out, but it's because I hadn't met my husband yet. And I didn't know where I was going to land yet.
Oh, see, and that's it. And when you're in this realm where you just know that and you have to, patience has never been something I'm good at ever since birth. My mom wrote it in my baby book. I am not patient, never have been. Man, that's my life's challenge. And just knowing though now, every time I've ever wanted something that didn't happen when I wanted it to, it always ended up different. And I follow Abraham Hicks, and she talks about cooperative components, and the timing will always be right. And you're getting ready to be ready to be ready to be ready. So it's just momentary, but we're human and we can say, man, this really sucks right now.
And you can feel the feelings and you can let those emotions out and you can do all of the work to make it so that you can really be ready for it when it does arrive.
Yep. It's about not staying in that place, sit with it for a second and then just say, okay, we know that in our past, I always tell people, don't go back to your past unless you're remembering the good stuff, or if you're remembering the things that lined up for you, because, the rearview mirror is smaller than the windshield. But I always love that I can go back and go, yeah, but do you remember how this had to line up, Maureen, and this had to line up and this had to, and then you got this out of it. And it's usually 10 times better than what you wanted in the first place. So I'm going to manifest that, coming forward, the timing will be right. So as we close up, you are so amazing and intriguing and inspiring. Listeners, I hope you enjoyed her story and her as much as I have, because she's incredible. If you don't find inspiration from her, I can't help you. I can't. I can't. At this point, I give up, because I brought everybody to the table that can help you. So as I wrap up, I have two questions that I always ask. Yeah. So the first one is it's more serious, but the last one's really fun. So the one question I have, under 10 words, what is the one thing you would tell your younger self?
Trust yourself. It doesn't even have to be 10 words. The thing that I wish I could give honestly everybody on this planet is fucking trust yourself. Yeah. And that if people could operate from that place where they trusted themselves first over anybody else, so much would change.
Go with your intuition, don't overthink it. Just feel your way through it. I agree with you. I think your instincts and your intuition are always telling you, we're just not listening. So that's great. Trust yourself. And then my fun thing that I do at the end is a little segment I call Take My Money.
Ooh.
So excuse me. I love weird stuff. I'm on a Facebook group that has like weird secondhand store finds, and the crazy things that you find in thrift stores, I think is super fun. It's like a treasure hunt. But anywhere on the internet or anywhere, I want to know, and I'm going to give you two examples of what I found today. I want to know what is A, the weirdest thing you've seen for sale, B, the weirdest thing you've bought, or the thing that you do that's kind of a weird, quirky thing that you don't think most people do. And since it's, this is going to come out later, probably in July, but right now we are going into the holiday season. What I found today on Amazon was a coloring book called Magical Mullets.
Oh my God.
Yes. Business in the front, party in the back, a coloring book of magical mullets. You cannot top that. Number two, there are a pair of flip-flops that look like lobsters. So if you want lobster feet, both of these can be found on Amazon. Just go to Weird Stuff. It's kind of crazy. So what is your weird, crazy thing you've got for me? Bring it, Amanda.
what I've seen on the internet, and it's not something I've purchased, but I used to be a part of a bunch of young mom groups, and there was one where they liked fancy dresses. Some of the dresses that they would post were like made out of freaking trash bags, but they were thousands of dollars. Like, and these really crazy, like, high end sort of, but they're just the weirdest. And it's fashion, I guess. I don't know. But I don't entirely understand, but I've seen some really weird things there. I don't usually go searching for the weird things, but that's a fun one. And then what is the weirdest thing?
What's your like quirky thing like in your household? I think everybody secretly has something quirky that they have to have that people don't know. So what's like your weird little, like, I always talk about how my husband likes the gas station toilet paper, the really thin stuff. And yeah, I know. Thank you. Oh yeah. He doesn't think it's weird, but, and I have to have like the 20 ply, like it needs to be like,
So you have 2 in your bathroom?
Yes. See, quirky, weird things. So what is I know you have something. What's your quirky thing?
I mean, I really like things put away and, neat, and it frustrates my kids. They're like, we're okay with clean, but we don't need to be neat. And so everything has a place, and, the bed gets made and things get put away. I'm definitely a little bit on the OCD side when it comes to some things like that. And things need to be straight and organized. And I don't think it's weird. I think that's where things belong. My kids differ. Don't agree with me there.
I'm with you on the OCD thing. And my mother was extremely OCD to the point where we had that shag carpeting in the 70s, and we had to vacuum it, and then she had a rake, and we had to go back and we had to rake it. Oh God, she'll kill me if she ever.
Well, and actually, here's even more example of my OCD. In my closet, I have everything organized by short sleeve shirt, like short shirt, long sleeve shirt, and there's even sections of like casual short sleeves versus like dressy, work type clothes, and then dresses have their own, like everything is very organized, and it like hurts my brain if it gets out of place. And I'll even try to do it to my kids' closets, and have to give up on that, because then I would have to put away their clothes for them every time. But when they were little, their closets were also meticulous.
I love it. Mine are color coordinated. So, and I have the same deal. Like, you need to have like pants by pants, dresses by dresses. And yes, I'm so with you. And it carried on, but I think the extremeness skipped me. I'm not extreme, but I'm very organized. But from my mother to my daughter, Jordan, she's actually starting a company to be a professional organizer in her house. I went there for Thanksgiving, and in her pantry there's labels for where everything like goes.
I don't have labels, but I definitely have the dried fruit, the dried nuts, the pasta, the like kids snacks. Like, they're not labeled, but they're very much, everything has a spot. And
yes,
and I will go fix it if people don't put it back correctly. And
I'm just gonna say, as healed as we are, there are some areas that indicates that we need a little bit of control from just a little carryover, but there's nothing wrong with it. It's healthy. I think if it makes us feel that our environments are controlled, then hey, it's our business. We're willing to do the extra work, right?
Exactly. And I've let go of a lot, right? My kids' rooms, they need to be able, when the cleaner comes, they have to be able to vacuum. But other than that, I let it go. Like if it's not my space, then it can be what it is. So
see, that's good. That is not extreme. That's really good. You've learned how to sort of, especially as they get older, trust me, when they're teenagers, you are not going to have any control of that. What your favorite thing will be is just shut the door. That's just the magic, and go in once a week when they're in school and gather all of the dishes, because that's, and then they're not allowed to eat in their room, or my grandson's not allowed to eat in his room, but I go in there and I will gather up like 5 cups that are in there.
Yeah, the teacups are the big ones. I think I had probably 10 upstairs this morning, so I feel you.
Well, my dear, this has been so much fun. And let's tell everyone where to find you, your book, everything. So everyone can get your book and contact you for anything and have comments and sign up for all of your
Absolutely.
coaching.
So my book, thesextraffickerswife.com, will have all the information on the book specifically and where to buy it and all of that. If you want to work with me on a healing coaching capacity, my website is amandaquickhealing.com. And that has how you can work with me either one-on-one or programs that I offer.
Awesome. And that book is coming out in January.
Yeah, January 10, 2023. So
exciting. So exciting. Congratulations. There's nothing like publishing your baby for the first time. It's nerve-wracking and just exhilarating at the same time. So
it's like terrifying, exciting, all of it. And I know that it's going to be birthed out to its own thing. I don't get to have control of it. So I have to just release it into the wild and let it go.
That's right. And you didn't write it to be a millionaire. You wrote it because it needed to be out there, and it's a form of release, and someone needs to hear it because someone's in that situation. So thank you again for being on, my new friend, Miss Amanda Quick. And
thank you so much.
We're going to stay in contact for sure.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you having me.
So listeners, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed today's episode as much as I did. If you are looking for coaching as well, dating coaching, relationship coaching, and self-confidence coaching, you can find me at lifecoachmaureen.com. My books also are available on Amazon. My dog is more enlightened than I am, and my dog is my relationship coach. Do not forget to go to mydogiseverything.net, where you can buy all kinds of fun things for your dog. Amanda's going to go on today and buy some healthy treats for Sunny, and little bandanas and all kinds of fun products that are holistic and healthy. So everyone, thank you for being here. Share. Give us those 5-star reviews. Bring all of your friends. Let's build this community. I love you all. If any of you are struggling with a mental health crisis, please call 988, and or in your local area, look for help for suicide help or for any type of mental health help that you need. I really care about you. You have a purpose here, and we want to see you in the new year. So take care, everyone. Until next week. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the I Never Knew podcast. If you found today's episode inspiring and educational, please be sure to follow, subscribe, and spread the word. The more people that join the Inc. community, the more it can develop and influence others as we work together for a healthier and brighter future. Until next time.